How many people here actually worked or make text adventure games or do stuff with it? 1, 2, 3. Don's not going to put his hand up, but yeah, exactly. Well, as the movie will go into, obviously, right? There's different eras, and that's just the way it works. So anyway, I'll start the thing soon. But before I do it, was there anything a pre-question somebody had, like what is this? I just sit down in anything that comes in this room. So you'll have a lot of fun finding the lamp in this movie. You're saying where's the actual physical lamp? I just could not I was here for 2 weeks. I could not get that lamp and everything else into my suitcase. I have a bunch of lamps that I keep around. You can get them very cheap from a place in Vermont now, but I couldn't get them cheap when I got them. But anyway, I make historical documentaries, and so this is my latest historical documentary. I hope to do more. And I'm a little bit more about the people than I am about the technical stuff. The technical stuff is in there, and they're definitely a geeky movie, but I believe that the hardest part to get is the stories from the people who were alive and what they thought about it and everything else. So you'll see there's a very humanist view, but I'm not allowed to go delve into a little bit about code. So definitely geeky. So let's see. Is everything working? Are people seeing me from the world of Google elsewhere and everything else? Sure. Does the movie have closed captions? I can turn on closed captions. Okay. All right. We're going to do the movie with closed captions. In point of fact, every single feature on the movie is closed captioned. I'm very big about that. I myself have unbalanced hearing. And so put me in a party room and I'd sound really dumb because I can't hear you. So I was very big on closed captioning everywhere, and I want to work with some people to do a video description version of this because blind players play a pretty big deal in text adventures.
Mm-hmm. So Ken, who's over here, did a lot of the work on the closed captioning that happens automatically with some YouTubes, and he's done good work on that. All right, this will be recorded for YouTube, and on YouTube, if you're a vlogger, you give 5 quick facts about yourself. So I'm going to give you 5 quick facts about Jason, and then I'm going to let him go. You probably know the first few. Textfiles.com. He's the curator of an awesome archive of bulletin board culture. And if you haven't gone there, look at the top 100 list. They're a lot of fun. Number 2, Bbs the Documentary. He's the director of that documentary, which was, 5 years ago, something like that. A while ago. He's on teams of various archiving projects, things like grabbing copies of major sites like GeoCities before they go offline. His cat has more than 1.5 million followers on Twitter. The cat is named Sockington, you might have heard. And 5, he was recently told by a major American weekly magazine that his title of computer historian is not an actual profession, and he had to change his profession. So, go to it.
Yeah, that was People magazine. I'm not afraid to say that. Not like I'm going to get into that again for anything that I want to be. They wanted my cat in it, so my cat is in People magazine, and then he made the yearbook because I guess he was one of the top important events of 2010. That is one well-fed cat. Anyway, so, but yeah, the reporter came back and said, the editor really can't take computer historian. Do you have anything else? And I was like, historian? And they were like, okay. So even though a lot of us want to think that a lot of things are finished, actually there's quite a bit ways to go. So, as said, my name is Jason Scott. I do a bunch of computer history. I'm really big into archiving old material. And data preservation, digital heritage. I'm a big loudmouth. I've said things both pro and con Google over the years, but pro and con everyone else because I have my things. All I want is that somebody in 50 years can choose to see something that we can see now, when possible. So that's an easy way to put it. But one of the things I've discovered was in doing my archiving was that when I was really good at getting old things like notes and pieces of paper and lots of photos and stuff, that doesn't really help you much if the person who wrote the stuff is has got no way to tell you their story. So I started to do a documentary called Bbs the Documentary. That was 205 interviews. It took 4 years. And it came out as a 3 DVD set. So it was just, I went from there being no BBS movie to the last BBS movie, the final one. And so after that, I said, what else affected my life? And I thought, let's do text adventures. What could possibly go wrong? So here we are a few years later, and I have now done a high-definition movie about text adventures. And this is this has 75 interviews, so it's a mere pittance compared to the previous one. And it goes into a whole variety of things. Now, to explain what you're seeing here, because in some place it's going to seem a little weird, the movie is optionally interactive, where it goes and plays you an introduction and then lets you choose which direction you go. But then there's the non-interactive version, and that just goes up and then steps through the 3 main parts. And I think that's a much better ideal for this crowd, because you guys are really technically astute, and there's all sorts of interesting things about it, about all the process. So, again, it's got historical sides to it. It's got the capitalist side, which is so important to some people, and then it's got the other side of like, who are the people who would play these, and who are the people who would make these. And some of them are in the audience, and I guess I'll introduce them at the end, or just mention. So, there's old school in the house, is all I'm saying. All right, old school is in the house. And just whatever, I do have copies here if somebody feels like buying them, just because I brought a stack of them. They each come with a coin, a gold and silver coin, because that's the best way to be an indie filmmaker, is to make gold coins that come with your DVD. Anyway, so again, we're going to play this one, and we're going to play it with the subtitles on. And I hope you enjoy it. It's called Get Lamp. Let's put this here. Mute up the mic, I guess. Do that. Did I do that right? Okay. What could go wrong? Now let's go with up here.
There is a machine that you must operate, but you have to figure out what machine it is, what its function is, what it does, why you need to operate it. You have to figure out what that thing is.
What is an adventure game, and what makes it so interesting for people? It's in a world right now where we're going to graphics a lot. It seems to be based in words.
You interact with the computer in words, and the computer spits words back out at you. And so there are no pictures at all, except the ones in your head, which are the best.
Now, these are the kind of games that, well, mostly, I guess, kids play with, and they go through different branching schemes, and every point you get a chance to go north, south, east, and west, and so forth. Are these games getting more sophisticated now? Who's writing them? Are they being written by authors, or what?
They're definitely getting more sophisticated, and I wouldn't even say that they're mostly played by children anymore. You can talk to other characters. You can ask fairly complicated questions, like, where were you on the night of the murder?
The thing that really interests me about text adventures is that they explore the power of words in an interactive context.
You're looking at a story told through text on a computer.
It's virtual reality that exists in words.
Interactive digital rhetoric that describes an experience.
It really was more like playing a book than playing a game.
I say to them, here's a form of literature you may or may not have seen before.
Typically what I end up having to do is I fumble around and talk about it for a little while, and then I say, here, sit down for a second, let me show you something, and then demonstrate it to them.
For me, this adventure has gone on for a lifetime. It's working on a problem that's bigger than you are. It's one you can't solve in 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
I started caving in the late 60s and then got involved in organized caving in the late 70s. I definitely had been caving and surveying caves before I latched on to the idea that there was this game out there that was so closely related to the caves and described them in a manner that would appeal to a caver.
Well, I knew Will White before the game existed, and I do know that my son, Tom Brucker, spent several weeks down here with Will Crowther and his wife at the time. They were intensely looking at a cave called Bedquilt Cave, a very confusing part of the cave. We have something like 10 lineal miles of cave within 1 square mile of land. Bedquilt is one of the highest density of cave passages that you find anywhere in the whole cave system.
We're fascinated with how tightly twisted and three-dimensional Bedquilt Cave turned out to be, and it was even more tightly twisted than appears to the casual person just passing through it. It's just really fun to discover in Bedquilt Caves these places where you can squeeze up through something and end up somewhere else. It's just filled with places like that.
That, I know, is the origin of the game Adventure that Will subsequently invented.
The walls really started tumbling down for me, and I really started learning a lot more when I started shifting, going into the Cave Research Foundation, learning what I learned about it, reading Rucker and Watson's The Longest Cave. They would use their compass readings and their bearings. They would start from a known position, and they would take the distance and bearing and measure from one place to another. Along the whole process, they would be taking notes about the shape of the tunnels, the shape of the size, features in the tunnel. They'd be mapping while they were going. So there was a sort of I don't call it decorative, but the artistic, atmospheric recording, along with the scientific coding of exactly where something is in relation to something else and what you need to do to get from one place to the other.
I think if they were able to compare our maps and the game, on one level it would be completely dissimilar, but on another there's a certain similarity. The general directions, east, west, north, south, up, down, all hold generally true as you go through the part that Crowther wrote.
I know others have added little touches to it now and then, but the genius was his in working out a diagram of the passageways in the Bedquilt.
I don't think it was really promoted as a caver's game, although I was really proud that he could have made Adventure go any direction it wanted to, but to sit there and, I mean, what better way to take a real cave and have real north, south, east, west, up, down directions that actually were based in reality.
But one of his daughters said to me that to her, Will Crowther is just her dad, and it's surprising to her that he's the J.D. Salinger of interactive fiction. He's chosen to make it speak for himself, and he hasn't tried to leverage it or anything. So you got to respect somebody like that.
So I was at Stanford my first year as a grad student there. One of the other first-year grad students had a job at the Stanford Medical Center. It was John Gilbert, and he came across this program that had somehow migrated onto the computer there. I managed to get a copy of it from that system onto the Stanford AI Lab machine where I had an account. I began having lots of ideas for ways to modify it and make it either more cohesive or just have more stuff to do in it. But in terms of the layout of the cave, the items you could find, the goals you had, I kept all of that. I didn't realize at the time that this was going to be starting a new genre. I sort of realized it was unlike anything I had encountered up to that point. And so, maybe subconsciously, if anybody had asked, I would have realized, yeah, this is something new. But still, I wouldn't have guessed that it was going to catch on so much.
It was 1979, and a friend of mine had just come back from Sierra College going nuts, saying, "Oh my God, there's games up at the college and they're free."
Everybody was talking about it for a period there in 1978. It came out of nowhere and it got copied all over the place.
In our dorm, there was a computer room which had 2 old DEC line printer terminals. And they said, there's this game you've got to try out. It's called Adventure. It's really great.
They had all these incredibly cool Lisp machines with big, gorgeous displays, and a bunch of people are huddled around a machine that's got text.
Yeah, you'd sit there with a little 300 baud telephone modem and type in a line, get lamp, and wait a minute, 2 minutes, and then they would type the thing out. So
Adventure took us over, took the whole lab over, consumed everyone for a while.
The game by Crowther and Woods was a sensation.
I had to sign in as JQ Public, and the password was JQ Public, and everybody was playing it.
And then nobody got any work done for a week.
As the legend goes, and it's absolutely true, all productivity ceased for about a week as people attempted to solve it.
That's something that in the 70s, to be able to type commands to a computer in something that looked like English, and to have it respond to you with lines of text telling you what happens next, that captivated people.
We got down to the point finally where Bruce went in with a binary debugger to get the last couple of points. I was working at Stromberg Carlson, just outside of Orlando, and they had a DEC mainframe there. And one of the guys in the IT department said, hey, we got a really neat game on the mainframe that we've been playing, and you might want to take a look at it. And it was Colossal Caves. So I got permission to get onto the game. I would come in every morning before work for an hour or two, and then I would stay for an hour after work so I could play the game. And I played it for about a week, and I was just blown away by it. It was a lot of fun. This was about the same time that I had gotten my first appliance computer. To me, an appliance computer was one I didn't have to build from a kit, which was kind of unique. And it was a TRS-80 Model 1. This adventure game was really fun. I've been trying to think of a good game to write. Adventure seemed, wow, this is perfect. The fellows in the IT department said, well, you want to take a look at the source code for this game? I said, no, I'm not really interested in that. I just like the concept. They said, well, this thing runs on the mainframe. There's no way you're going to get it into a 16K TRS-80 Model 1. And that was Adventureland. This was back in 1978, and that's where it all started. Adventure International made adventure games. Literally, we were the first, as far as I know in the world, first computer gaming company that was selling computer games primarily. That was it. That was what we were doing. We were selling computer games, and we were doing it to a mass market.
It just came up last night. I was watching a movie from the early 80s because we thought maybe the kids would enjoy that. And my wife was telling the girls, you know, what time this was. It was a long time ago. It was before we were married. It was when Daddy was doing Zork and those things. And my 7-year-old said, "What's Zork?"
I think there were two products that sold more computers than anything else: VisiCalc and Zork.
We would go after school to this store and play whatever games were available, type games in, and I remember Zork coming out and playing it on an Apple II, and we were just completely blown away.
People would see Zork and they'd go, "I gotta have me one of them." That's all. Who do I make the check out to?
You know, someone who helped on Adventure played a little bit of Zork, and his comment was that you don't go into Zork to play, you go into Zork to do battle.
I actually completed Zork, and that was probably in itself like the biggest accomplishment I made, you know.
And the company was literally founded and named before we had any idea what kind of products we were doing. So by definition, you want a name that can pretty much go anywhere. So Infocom sounded like it could be a billion-dollar company. You had no idea what it did, but it sounds substantial.
The people who formed Infocom, these were very talented folks from the computer science department at MIT.
If you know what the word schlump means, I don't think there were any at the company. There were no average people there.
If you had some technical knowledge and some understanding of what the disk capacity was and you cared to count characters, you wondered, how is it possible that they got so much text on a disk?
You know, they were sort of things to waste my time, fun little diversions, and then I hit Infocom, so I was like, wow, this is really, really good.
Very professionally done, so I knew that every time an Infocom game came out, it was going to be extremely high quality.
You know, it was really kind of the renaissance for as far as game packaging design, because they put out some really gorgeous looking packages that really we have not seen anything like since then. Keep in mind, these were not collector's editions. These were the standard versions of the packaging.
You know, all the other games were kind of crappy packaged and everything, but there on the shelf was this one game which was like in a dossier with this detective thing going on. It was Deadline, and I saw that, and I found out it was like not only a text adventure, but a really advanced text adventure. I saw that, I said, "Oh, this is it. I got to do this."
I think I felt lucky at the time. I definitely, you know, looking back now, 20 years later, you know, feel really, really lucky.
When you were a programmer, you wrote payroll packages. I mean, you wrote software for scientific instruments.
I was working on a fertilizer mixing system in BASIC.
You know, something like that, or you did some kind of research. But this idea that you could somehow make a living doing what we were doing, you know, the fun we were having making games and everything, it's ridiculous.
It's a job that didn't exist when I first started my working life, and in a sense it doesn't exist anymore now.
Talking about how wonderful it was, and it really was. I mean, I can say, for me, it was a sad truth that it was the best job I've ever had, and a job I don't think I could ever get again.
I remember telling friends that if I could have any job at all, I think it would be this one.
It was a fun factory, you know, and they put in the Play-Doh and we pressed the button and out come all these interesting things, but they didn't know how that process worked at all.
Not a job. It was an amazing creative experience with an amazing creative group, and I do think it was something very special and unusual.
You would hear conversations there at Infocom and other game companies that you never would hear anywhere else in your life.
One day we were talking about the properties of backguano, and in the middle of it we stopped and said, no one's going to believe we're actually discussed this at work.
You know, so you're walking down the hall and out of somebody's office is going, well, you know, the elf is drunk, but I've given him the wand of disappearing.
And we called it interactive fiction, not text adventures. And part of that is being a little bit grand about the medium and its possibilities, but part of it was, I think it was a more accurate term.
I think there was a time period, probably 80 to 84 sort of range, where for a lot of the machines, compared to anything else out there, there was just nothing that compared.
We would have 3 or 4 games in the top 20 of soft sell all the time. In 83, 84, 85, we were definitely one of the more important publishers, and possibly one of the most respected.
All the other games companies back then that had adventure games, those came from the text adventure era. So, a lot of people owe everything to text adventures.
When I started, the goal was to push the envelope. The goal was to create something different and new and exciting, something nobody had ever seen or experienced before.
We were able to compress things in ways that delivered so much more than anything else.
You felt like you were joining a special brainy club by buying these products. And I put my star-crossed poster up on the wall and sat there with all my accessories around me, and I was happy as a clam.
People were wowed by it when they saw those games, when they found how much they got, how many hours of entertainment they got out of those games.
The whole feel of it, the marketing, everything, just had this very friendly, smart people feel about it. I don't know how to put it without sounding snobby, but it was for literate people. It was for people who like to read.
Kathy, I guess you know as well as I do that most people at one time or another have played those Space Invader type games on their computers.
Mm-hmm.
But have you ever thought of a game in which you sort of match wits with a computer, kind of a whodunit situation in which what you do dictates the outcome of the game?
Sounds interesting.
Yes.
And what you're doing is allowing the person to essentially be Raymond Chandler and program their way through to the end, one way or the other.
That's exactly right. In some ways it's like a book, in some ways it's like a game.
We wrap ourselves in a game and become a participant.
A new type of story in which your decisions and your active participation affects the outcome.
What will they think of next?
This is the kind of thing that we're going to be playing with into the 21st century.
Okay. Certainly, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we definitely didn't spend enough time kind of thinking about how lucky we were at that time. We kind of assumed, oh well, this is what it's always going to be like. This is going to go on forever. Much like youth itself. There wasn't much reflection on, oh, this is just a shooting star, and in a year and 3 years it'll all be gone.
The thing that I was so taken by was this idea you were literally stepping into a world.
It's as if the player and I are in a room together. It's me and him, and it's what are you going to try and how am I going to respond?
you can make a choice, and your choices have ramifications. And you think about that.
I think as a kid, you don't get to make a lot of choices about your life. You don't get to choose where you live, you don't get to choose where you go to school, you don't get to choose your classes even.
Exploring, discovery, seeing what's around the next corner.
For a kid, it's really appealing to be able to, in this fantasy world, essentially make your own choices in life.
That level of dynamic interaction and that number of tree branches was unheard of.
The idea of coming up with these huge worlds where there's so much that you can see and do.
When I played Zork, I felt like I was in that world, and the computer screen disappeared, and it was like reading a book, only even cooler than reading a book in certain ways, because I could do things in that world.
It lets you see other people's points of view, I think. You get to see the worlds that other people live in.
They had such a craft to them. They really sat down and did this.
The way the game worked is it drew your mind into the game completely, but the flip side of that is it took an investment of time on your part to get into the game, because it wasn't just simple. I mean, there were things that took 20 steps to solve a problem, and you had to figure out every one of those 20 steps.
It was all you thought about for a month, while you were working on this thing. Or, in some cases it would take you like a year to finish one of these.
It was this communal sense of, let's see if we can tackle this thing, and the puzzles were just so numerous and so massive, it almost felt like you needed to have someone helping.
And when someone would have a big breakthrough, we'd go rushing down and say, oh, I think we have to do this, and it would work or not work, and the maps would come out and notes would get made.
Because there wasn't the internet for the instant hints and all of that, and so you actually had to sit down and bash your head against it yourself.
And Zork and the Radio Shack, you couldn't play alone because you had three guys on your shoulder. No, dude, the full piece of plastic, you gotta. So solitary, and it was a team sport too. Most people would not imagine that it could be.
Saturdays at 7 in the morning was when everybody came up to the college to watch this guy play Adventure. So that was where I basically got my exposure, was watching somebody else play it. I wasn't able to actually play it myself.
So it was a long process. It wasn't kind of like a week's worth of gaming and we said, oh, that was kind of cool, I wonder what's next.
I think most people who are working on the games thought that the most special thing about them was the obsessive nature of puzzle solving, and how you could be, playing the game and trying things, and nothing's working, and you're tearing your hair out, and finally you give up and you turn the computer off and you go stomping away, and the next day you're at work and not even thinking about it, and suddenly, oh my god. And then you can't wait to get home to try what you just thought of, and you go running in and you turn on the computer and you try it and it worked.
It's very rarely that I find myself playing a game of IF without taking notes. You couldn't hold the map in your head. You had to map it out. There's lots and lots of objects. You had to make notes of where everything was and what it was used for and what you hadn't figured out yet. Personally, I like taking notes. I like having my own little, notch on the bedpost, as it were, that I've figured this out of it's sort of like my own little personal progress bar as to what I've been able to accomplish in these games.
And I think, again, adventure games probably appeal to people who are very methodical and very logical in the way they do things. Because mapping's a huge part of playing any adventure, text adventure.
Colossal Cave was relatively straightforward, and that if you left a room from the north, you would then exit that room again to the south and you'd wind up where you started. But Zork had these passages that apparently went out of the room to the north, and then you twisted and turned and spun and such that going south again might get you to an entirely different room. Mapping was quite time consuming, and we were working on, I think, huge line printer paper from the original 14 inches wide, 15 inches wide, that comes off those high-speed line printers. And even that, we had several sheets taped together by the time we were done. I mean, it was a big, complex environment that they put together.
I can draw a map
that not only tells me how things are connected in space, but also where objects were that I have picked up. You can note on the map where you got them. You can note where it seems like there's some obstacle, and you can start thinking about puzzles as well.
This parallels exactly the mapping of a large cave system. And it's only when you do that you begin to comprehend what the pattern is. In caving, you try to find the pattern. Once you know the pattern, you know the process that created the cave, and you can see the missing parts of the pattern.
I mean, mazes are sort of a special case in IF. Like, people have a pathological aversion to mazes, which is, like I don't know, you like ring a bell and then like you kick a dog a bunch of times and like it starts like crying after you ring the bell a couple times. So that's how people in the IF community feel about mazes.
Oh my God, a maze, kill me now.
And there's nothing intrinsically wrong about mazes, but people have like a built-in aversion to them by now. So that's kind of a special case.
I thought mazes were old school from the beginning myself.
Mazes were a staple of early interactive fiction. It seemed as though virtually every story had at least one or two mazes that you had to somehow map your way around in and figure your way out of.
The ultimate adventure game cliche is a maze. So there was always, oh my, another maze, oh please, or, this one is too ridiculous.
When you're encountering something for the first time, it seems really cool. When I played Zork, I was like, oh, this maze, what a brilliant idea. And then 50,000 iterations later, it just does not seem so brilliant.
IF is actually pretty crummy at literal spatial mazes. 3D graphics do that much better. You can create enormous, immersive, expansive environments that are highly confusing that you wander around in, and you do all your wandering visually and physically. Typing go north, go east, go south, go east, go north, go east. At a certain point you start to long for a joystick.
The worst thing you can ask a player to do is sit down with a pad of paper, dropping items in each room so they can keep track of what these different rooms are and then be able to put all the little lines together. Essentially, it just becomes tedium and it takes you out of that immersion into the world.
My goal, whenever I wrote a game that had a maze in it, was to produce a maze that, if you got the trick, became trivial.
There may be limits to what mazes can do. I don't think they can impress on us, powerful new ideas about the world.
Old-style mazes in 3D games and console games and in IF always will work to burn more hours and create more kind of consumable playtime. But if you're not understanding the way the author is thinking and having insights, what's the point?
If you sit down in front of a text adventure for the first time, the first thing that is going to happen is you're going to type something and the computer's not going to understand it. That's a real experience. The misconception is that that's the intended interaction of the game, and that's what the author has spent all of his time thinking about. The truth is, of course, that the author has this huge set of assumptions about what you know. The author thinks that you've got a good grounding in how most of these games work, and he spent all of his time thinking about how he can make this well-known text adventure interface unique and interesting for his situation. Which is great for our community, because we're all familiar with it. It's a total failure for newcomers. I wish I had a fantastic story to tell you about how I've solved this problem. I do not.
People, I think, misunderstand the nature of interactivity, thinking that it requires giving the player absolute freedom.
Like, if you're an inexperienced player, you might think that you can be able to write just take over Kingdom and have it work.
Something is mentioned just because it adds a distinctive flavor to the room, but the player's response is, oh, you mentioned rocks here. Let me try and pick up a rock.
Someone's going to type examine sun, and if you haven't implemented the sun as a separate object, they're going to
say, ha, that's a mistake, this sucks.
Because the more freedom you give the player, the more the player has the power to do things you did not anticipate and to do things you did not want.
I mean, it's like a, like a funhouse ride, or, at the amusement park. You're on rails. You really are on rails, and, to a large part. And you can sort of travel off to these tributaries, but you're still ultimately on rails.
The player and the author have an illusion of interacting. It is just an illusion. But, when we go to the movies and we watch a movie, we don't think we're really in the place where the movie is representing. There's all kinds of illusions. The willing suspension of disbelief happens everywhere.
It's like Eliza. You get an answer, but it has nothing to do with what you're doing, and at some point you realize it's a fake.
Frankly, we couldn't, as implementers, we couldn't anticipate. Well, not only could we not anticipate everything, we couldn't anticipate half of what was expected.
So what happens is the worlds get bigger, and as you open up the vocabularies, they get sparser, because there's less real information, and it's mostly noise. It's just there to convince you that the world is there.
And that was mostly not because the implementers weren't smart about it. It was because of the severe limitations on the number of just the sheer vocabulary you could have in the game.
The total text in a typical Infocom game maybe would equal like a 30-page novella.
I mean, Zork, the size of a Zork game is, I think, around 88K or something like that total. It's very tiny. It only didn't even use all the virtual machine. And Wishbringer banked right up against that 128K limit that the original system had. It was very hard to do any kind of deep exploration of a subject because you just didn't have room for the text.
You can't handle everything that somebody might try. What you want to do is you want to handle the most common things that people will try and the most interesting things that people will try.
As a player of interactive fiction, it's very easy to not appreciate the work that went into it. You just come across one error message or one response that the designer didn't think of, and you think, oh, well, forget this game. After you've actually gone through and had to think of all those things and code them and write them yourself, your perspective really changes.
And how much of the very limited resources that you have do you want to expend on letting the player go down in that direction? So in a lot of cases, what we just did in that case is just kill the player.
Yeah, it's almost what is left unsaid, unrevealed in a lot of cases. You don't know exactly what that dragon would look like, and I never would anyway. But to have that gap where you fill in your conception of a dragon, it will be your ultimate dragon.
You take stock of your possessions. You're wearing a pack. You have one Zork note. A financial nymph appears on your keyboard. By the way, you can check the amount of cash you're holding at any time with the cash command, or just type $1 followed by return. Buy. She disappears with a link.
It's like you would pretend you would have magic, right? But you don't know what it's really like. I mean, you don't really know what it's like to have magic. I mean, you can read a lot about you can read science fiction and sort of put yourself in the place of a telepathic or magical character, but you really don't know what it's like. And I think that's sort of the same. It's like playing to be sighted. I'm playing at being sighted.
And it's weird. It's funny playing games like I actually have to. That actually does trip me out sometimes. I have to, in games you have to have like a lantern or a flashlight or something to provide a source of light. Mm-hmm. I don't think about that. It's like you go into a room. It's like it's pitch black. You can't see, and I'm like, I don't care.
If you play something like Zork, everything is described, and sighted people don't always do that. So you not only get a sense of place and how places work and how you move through them, but you also get a sense of objects. You can examine, it's pretty much everything you can pick up in that game, and it'll have a description. So it's very helpful.
The thing about text adventures is they really help you build mental maps, especially if you don't cheat and write anything down. And I know that the more I played text adventures, the more effective I was at navigating a strange place.
That's it. There aren't limits. You can explore a world with all your senses. I think for the blind, it's actually really liberating because you can explore a world with sight.
For instance, haunted theater, I played that in university, and I never would have realized that so much, location was involved. So many different areas were involved in an old-style movie theater.
My last game, I deliberately put in a section of the game that allows a blind player to play it. It's screen scraper friendly, so that it would read out loud the game to them and allow them to play. And that was done because I was approached by blind players asking me to do that. That was a kind of an eye-opener for me to make me think about the necessity of doing that.
Get lantern. You take the rusty lantern off the side.
The first time that we went to the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago, I was finishing work on Sea Stalker and working in our booth on the floor. Got a chance to give a short demo for a group of school teachers who were there. And after just the shortest demo I've ever given, they said, "Oh, this is wonderful. This is just what our students need. It's on their level. They'll be interested. They'll learn from it." And I felt really good about that.
I started teaching in 1968. This last year is my 38th year. Teaching with interactive fiction poses some really significant challenges for teachers. It's not an easy technique. It's a wonderfully powerful technique. It's great for helping kids to solve problems, outstanding for improving kids' reading comprehension, unique in its power to help kids read with greater fluency.
Writing for Interactive Environments is a class looking at the traditional story structure and then discussing also how it takes place in games, drawing analogies to film and other popular media.
I give them 2 weeks. At the start of the 2 weeks, they've never before seen a piece of interactive fiction. They maybe have never played a text adventure. And they've certainly never programmed in form. And at the end, they have to turn something in. So that's the experience.
So our first things we do in that class is we work on what are good characters, and then what are good settings for stories, and then how those interact with one another. And then we talk about things like puzzle structures. What's a good puzzle? What's a good riddle?
In my case, when I'm using IF in teaching, it's not really for the IF. It's not for the interactive fiction at all. It's in many ways for the idea of simulating space, and also just to give my students some weird environment that they've never worked in.
Usually they become very interested very quickly and will ask to try some more of that story the next day or very soon thereafter.
Write a character, but write him 4 different ways. Show me him from the perspective of his father. Show me him from the perspective of his friend who hates him now because they had an altercation in the past.
I mean, this is the only form of literature that has built into it aesthetically designed pauses in the process of reading that are perfect from a teacher's point of view.
You know, among my students who liked interactive fiction the least, a certain number complained that it made them think too hard. And I really don't mind if people complain that I make them think.
Actually learn a new form of literature. And it, along with many of the other challenges that go with teaching in the current era, it makes it difficult for teachers to work, even if they have one another to support.
For them, the real challenge is getting them to actually sit down and read a serial, linear, closed narrative. For them, reading is a chore. I find that it's funny. I find myself both ways. I'm like, that's heartbreaking that they think that reading is a dead thing. But at the same time, they're writing for a world where they're going to have to craft these broken up, chopped up, sliced and diced narratives for different mediums, and they're going to have to learn to adapt. Broken up, chopped up, sliced and diced narratives, chopped up, broken up, and they're going to have to learn to adapt.
My doctorate is officially in English literature. My field is new media. No discipline has been extremely excited about owning text adventure games. They've found academic safe harbor in whatever individual was most passionate about them. But I mean, of course, Marianne Buckle's doctorate in German literature, right?
I think that topic, unfortunately, chose me. They were just so happy. It looked like they were having a great great time. That's what I remember of my first contact with adventure, that, oh, these people love this. They are totally involved in it. If you stood at the beginning of films, if you stood at the beginning of radio, if you stood at that moment and you knew this is important, this isn't just something to toss aside, this is really, really important. Could you go back and write about Georg Trakl and his poetry about purple beasts? I mean, it's beautiful poetry, and I loved that poetry. But that's unimportant. And this topic was important. Someday there is going to be a genius, an absolute genius, who writes something so brilliant, so involving, so magnificent that you'll just weep for joy doing these games because they make you involved in the story. That's just so different than anything else that we've ever had.
I don't know if my fate will be to be left in some sort of academic dustbin of history, or if this will be a brilliant coup that will become the cornerstone of a luminous career. But I do know that it was time well spent, and that when I look at what I've done, I think, even if not me, I hope somebody comes along and builds on this.
They were having so much, it was a moment when people were having so much fun. It was a ball. That was really fun. And I thought, oh, if everybody were doing this, all of society would be better because we'd all be happier. We'd all play with each other a little bit more. It'd be, like being kids again. It didn't turn out quite that way.
Now, did you actually solve adventure?
No, I never did. I never did. I never did.
Let's have a little thought experiment here. Right. You're playing in a virtual world, and it's got these pictures, and they're looking pretty good. And you think, oh, that's pretty good. I like these pictures, and I make pretty good. They're only. I mean, it's a 3D world, but I'm only seeing it in 2D on the screen. So maybe if I got like the little headset on and put that on, now I can see it in 3D. But if I move my head a bit too much, maybe if you put little sensors on so I can move my head, now I can see it properly. Yes, it's all here, but I can still only seeing things, and maybe I could have maybe some feeling as well. So I put a little data glove on, and yes, it feels warm. Oh, that's good. But I'm not hearing things. I've got the goggles on, and I haven't got this sense of being in a place, and maybe I want to be able to move. So tell you what, let's get these big like coffin things and fill them full of these gels, and I'll take off all my clothes and put on all these different devices, and I'll lay down it, and then it put these little electric currents through and make it feel hard or soft. So it gives me the impression that I'm actually walking through grass because it's generating. And now I'm beginning to feel I'm really in one of these places. But of course, really, all that's happening here is that my senses are being fooled into this. What would happen if I was maybe just cut out the whole business with the fingers? Just stick a little jack in the back of your head, and it goes right into the spinal cord, and then you're talking straight to the brain there. All the senses that come into your brain, they're all filtered, and they're used to create a world model inside your head in your imagination. But if you could talk straight to that imagination and cut out all the senses, then it would be impossible to ignore it. You couldn't say, oh, that's just an image of a dragon. That would be a dragon. And if there was some kind of technology which could enable you to talk straight to the imagination, well, there is. It's called text, and it's been around for several thousand years. And I have seen people leap out of their chairs when a line is said in front of them, there is an immense fire-breathing dragon here. And when you're typing, the output that you're typing is in words the same as the input. There's no shift. It's not that you're looking at a picture and then typing in words, looking at a picture moving around a mouse around. It's the same environment. It's all words, it's all thoughts, it's all the mind, it's all the imagination. So when you're dealing with text, it's really for people who have got strong imaginations. And the tragedy is that many people have strong imaginations, it's just they never get to play the text because they went for the graphics first. Will we always have text? We will always have text. Will it always be inferior to graphics? Well, in terms of player numbers, yes. In terms of player experience, no. Because no matter how far you take graphics, eventually the farthest you can get is text. That's a rant for you.
Excellent.
I'm not one for click and watch them games. I can't get on with them. I think it's best up here. Is the best computer you can get. Is your brain.
You know, I think people's minds have changed over 27 years, and we may not be satisfied anymore with text and get knife and kill troll. But when you play it, to me anyway, it's still as mentally engrossing as it ever was.
When you're reading the prose, it's like you hear it in your head and you're forming your own picture of it, a picture which is a personal thing to you, and not some art director's idea of what Gollum looks like or what he sounds like.
People would much rather look at pictures than read, as a rule. There's, you know, there's a subculture of people who love to read and are passionate about reading and passionate about books, but it's not a majority of the public.
Text is lost because people just expect computer games to have graphics, and if you want them to play a game that doesn't have graphics, then you have to give them a very good reason not to.
What the greatest of literature, the greatest of art does is that it resonates back to yourself. And, you know, a side-scrolling shooter where you're just endlessly blowing up identical spacecraft is not going to do that. But text adventures gave us the possibility that a story could have meaningful consequences, both internally and for the reader, for the player, in a way that had never been seen before.
There's something that needs to be refound. We've lost something and we need to find it again.
The prevailing opinion is no one will go to their computer and sit there and read to play something. They want to see the visuals. They want to play with the Xbox or something like that. But in fact, what's happened since then? Now, we all have the internet. And what do people do with computers most of the time that they're sitting on the computer? They're on the internet and they're reading. And they read a page and then they type something in. Maybe they type a new address and they go to that next address. They click on the next thing to go to the next page. And we read for hours and hours on our computers now. And they didn't believe that we would do that anymore. Now we're back to it. We're all reading on our computers. I don't think that if we just put it out there and say, here's a text game, and we'll put it in bookshops and put it in computer stores, I think it's an easy sell.
In case you're wondering what's happening, I mean, if you like solving puzzles, interactive fiction, I mean, there are puzzles, and some of them are doozies.
Interactive fiction required you to look at a set of objects, a set of characters and situations.
You have to explore an environment, and you have to try to see what's going on, and then you have to figure out what the right course of action is, what to do.
And then somehow pop outside of your frame of reference so that you can see it in a different way and get the solution and figure out how to get through that door.
It's up to you to solve it after I've done all my moves.
So Graham Nelson said that interactive fiction was like a story at war with a crossword puzzle. There's this aspect of narrative reading and the type of enjoyment we get from literature, and then just puzzle solving.
It's like building an obstacle course in real life and having people run through it.
You would introduce bugs into your story, places where, you you can't get there from here and you have to, or there's some linkage that's missing.
You have to pick up this object to go to this room so that you can get through that door, except you can't carry this large thing through there.
There's a strange system, there's this environment with its own strange physical laws, and you have to figure out what they are. What does this mean?
It's really kind of weird, right? You've got a story, and either to get more of the story or to see stuff, I mean, whether or not it's puzzle, you have to keep poking at it. That doesn't seem like it should be very entertaining, does it? But it works for me.
There is a real pleasure to working on a puzzle for a while, not looking at the hints, and then having it come to you in a flash of insight. That is just a great feeling.
Puzzles in IF are sort of an outgrowth of previous challenges between people.
Certainly even before computers and adventure games, there have been people whose job it was to come up with puzzles where, you know, eventually you figure out and have the aha moment, which is so satisfying, and you know, you solve it and you're done.
I think the riddle provides special power in understanding what's happening there. Because in a riddle, you have language that's used to describe often very ordinary things. So you have to read and you have to figure things out. Systems of thinking that are slightly off from the everyday. Solving or resolving the things that you read, the world that you're in. Riddles give that to us, and also interactive fiction. And it provides something that the text of a riddle doesn't, a way that you can test your answer.
The sorts of puzzles you could come up with was open-ended. You know, as the game designer got to think of what it was you were trying to do, instead of it being, well, come up with a set of rules and then there's just random elements that make the puzzle different each time.
If you're right, you find out, yes, you were right. You understand something about this unusual system.
There was no limit on what you could include in the game. It's just a small matter of programming, as they say.
So there should always be something for the player to do, whether it's, and traditionally that's solving puzzles.
With a game where you're trying to create a narrative, there's a push. You're trying to push the player into in a certain direction.
The trick is to put puzzles in there in such a way that they seem like they're part of the natural flow of the story, rather than being what they really are, which is the locked gate you have to get through to get the next chunk of prose.
You had to appeal to their sense of overcoming the odds and figuring things out.
As an author, you have to have the faith of the player. You have to have your player think, especially when you're going through puzzles, that the problem is with them.
These are the rules that I'm going to follow, and I'm always going to stick by these rules. Now, you don't know what's going to happen in this game. You don't know all the rules in this game. Uncovering the rules is part of the fun.
From my point of view, I could have all the fun of coming up with more puzzles, whereas other people, once they solved all the puzzles, they were done. I was never done. I could always come up with more puzzles.
Here is some action that the player can do which is not obvious and not insane. It's surprisingly clever, and I mean that as a very specific criterion. When the player thinks of it, he'll be surprised at how clever he is.
Puzzles work best when they're integrated with all the other elements of the game and not just something that's laid on the same way that story works best. When it's, kind of integrated with the other components of the game and not something that you just lay on at the end.
For me, like the ideal IF game would be one which is winnable on the first turn, but you don't know what the command is to win it until you've gone all the way through the game and solved it.
You're simultaneously designing everything leading up to that puzzle. All the interactions with that object, Up until then, all the uses of that verb, that slightly obscure verb, up until then.
The process of the game then would be the process of teaching the player how to win, and then once you've taught them how to win, the actual act of winning is trivial.
The vision that Ihor had that made him look up some highbrow poet who was teaching at Berkeley was an impulse to put more art, more intellectual content, something more like literature into the interactive computer electronic theater. I was interested in the kind of hybrid way art moves along. I was interested in something new, and it was clear to me from my small experience of adventure, the description of Zork, the stuff I saw on these monochrome monitors, that this was largely about the quest plot, which is one of the basic plots of great works. The Gilgamesh epic is a quest for the nature of immortality, the nature of death, the nature of mortality. And kill dwarf, get sword, etc., was completely in that line. Indeed, the imagery was very traditional. The closest I came to any conflict or anxiety was their constant pressure to put puzzles in the thing. And I just wanted to keep imagining. And they said, you know, the guys who pay money for this will be very disappointed if they can get from A to Z in an hour, let alone 10 minutes. They want a week or two of agony. Of course, they were right. A lot of our, we can call them arguments, a lot of our discussions, the dialectic was between I wanted to think of some new goofy thing, and they wanted to be sure that it would be hard to figure out, that there would be a strong puzzle aspect to it.
I have never been very enthusiastic about puzzles.
I suck at puzzles. I suck at solving puzzles, and I suck at creating puzzles.
Puzzles don't really permit much rich interaction. Basically, either you get it wrong, in which case you're frustrated and confused and angry, or you get it right, in which case you're bored.
Once a player realizes that, oh, I was doing everything right, it's just that the parser didn't understand the synonym I was trying to use, it's really tough to get the player back.
There's a right and a wrong, and the right is the author's version of right, and you have to find his right way of doing it.
But from the player's perspective, it's not any more valid than any of the other hundreds of possible solutions they see beforehand.
Hunger puzzles, light source puzzles. There were all these hallmarks of old school IF that actually created, at least in my experience, mostly aggravation.
You ate the bread here, so now you don't have it later on, so now you starve to death. Or you starve to death here, or you didn't do this in time, and so now, too late, the game has been made unwinnable and Krill the Sorcerer takes over the world.
They were more in there to make things take a long time than to really bring you into the world or help you have fun.
It's easy to write puzzles that are just impossible to solve.
Well, if I stand in the 15th room in the eastern corner holding a purple saucer and I say Shazam,
you have things which make no sense at all. You have a monster you kill in the woods and it drops a golden bracelet. What was it doing with the golden bracelet? We really don't know. It's never explained.
So when somebody complains about an old trope in a dungeon or something like that, what they're really, I think, saying is, oh my god, this means that we're going to see the puzzle with like a 5-cup measure and a 3-cup measure, and you need to get 4 cups of water. Like, no one wants to see the old puzzles again, because we've already solved the old puzzles. Like, when you solve a puzzle, you've drained all the juice out of it.
I don't know anybody who erases crossword puzzles to fill them in again. I really don't. Do you?
Overall puzzle space, I think, was largely played out in the mid-'80s in terms of what is done in text adventures. Every so often someone comes up with neat variations on it, or neat ways of subverting things so that what you thought was one sort of a puzzle turns into another sort.
This black and white approach doesn't work very well, and again, that was what has always held back interactive fiction.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I make all the students play that game. And if they can't beat the Babelfish puzzle, which everybody who's played that one knows what I'm talking about, if they can't beat that one, they get a C in that assignment. To them, it's silly and childish and primitive. And it still kicks their ass, and they can't get past it.
There's no shame in looking at the hints, I've decided, because you get to see the end of the story, and for me, the story is the thing that I'm the most interested in anyway.
But if you're a game designer and you're looking at somebody else's game and you see these things, you think, wow, it's pretty good there, I quite like that. But the players wouldn't think that. But because you as a designer have seen it, you think, oh, that's pretty good. You're not playing the game anymore. You're playing, I'm a designer looking at something which is good.
Adventure games are not like real life. There are solutions. And so whenever you feel like, well, I'm stuck, this puzzle's impossible, they're always possible. It's not like, again, there always is an object to be found somewhere. It's not like a key you might lose and it's gone. The key is in the dump somewhere at some landfill 9 miles away. You're never going to find it. In the adventure game, the key will be found. Okay, and if it's not a key for that door, then there is another solution. And when you bear that in mind, that there is a solution, the games become easier to play and more fun.
Last time I need to do this.
When we were making them initially, we often talked about the fact that this is a genre that could last for centuries. We looked at, we would compare it to the book and say, well, yes, technology has changed, and phonographs came along, and radios and televisions and all these other technologies, but the book is still the book, and it still sells. Just because other kinds of games are possible, or fancy graphics are possible, or whatever, doesn't mean that there's no room for a text adventure. So we were fairly convinced that was a genre that could continue. I think we might have been kidding ourselves in terms of it being, big enough to sustain, a company. But obviously it's continued in terms of hobbyists doing it.
It started on a group of Usenet news groups, Rec Arts in Fiction and Rec Games in Fiction, that were originally talking about hypertext and things like that, but slowly discussion of Infocom games came to dominate it in the early 90s.
I rediscovered interactive fiction through the online communities that had been around for quite a while.
And so there was this nucleus of people who were interested in interactive fiction and talking about it and doing reverse engineering of Infocom's story format and all that kind of thing.
Everything was tied in, and as soon as you find the outer edge of the web, everything funnels in towards the center, and you find this interconnected group of people.
You had some more artistic types who were interested in the medium, and the academics who later were studying it as an art form. And so all of these people sort of accumulated around this news group.
It kind of blows my mind that we have this group of people that is willing to put in all of this work for free, knowing that they'll never be compensated in any way besides people's attention and praise. And they're creating these amazing pieces of work.
We're talking about a community that has been around, we're coming up really on 20 years worth of community if you go back to the early internet days.
I've been following the amateur scene fairly closely over the decades,
And, they've got all the basics down. There's some really, really talented people. Any one of them could have succeeded at Infocom, as well as any of us, I think. There's some really bright people out there doing these things.
I guess my reaction was that I thought this was very nice that the genre, even though it had died as a commercial medium, was continuing to live on as an artistic medium, and feeling almost a sense of relief that that it would continue to live on in this new form.
In terms of the real enthusiasts, it seems like everybody who's interested in playing them is interested in writing them.
They're not expecting to sell or hoping to sell 100,000 copies at $30 or $40 a piece.
People are writing IF when they get off work, or they're writing IF while they're at work if they have a job that enables them to do that.
They're hoping to make a literary or intellectual statement of some kind, or even just to explore something that they think is funny, and they may be the only ones who think it's funny, but they're having a good time anyway.
It's sort of like art films. There are people who live for those films, but they're not going to be commercial success. You won't show them in the main theaters to the masses because the masses don't want to see that sort of thing. They don't want to think that way. They don't. They're there to be entertained. They're not there to go marvel at, oh yeah, well, that's a different way of looking at it.
We know what this model looks like. It doesn't look like the films industry. It doesn't look like the games industry. It looks like Faulkner at his security job with his typewriter in a little hut.
If your audience is mostly people who write these games, it's really the perfect thing.
It looks like writing novels. That's really exciting to me.
IF writers are awfully pure in my limited experience, but that's the impression I have of them, is that they do this thing because they deeply love it. And it's impossible, at least for me, not to admire that.
And so then the question, at what age should people write IF, might be a lot like the question, at what age should people write? Let them write badly as early as possible, and let them write more and better later.
Interactive fiction is something that you can do yourself. You don't need a group of 40 people, and you don't need a panel of advisors. It's a real personal way to write a game, and when I'm doing that, I'm not really thinking about the audience. The audience is me. Then when I'm finished, I want to share that.
I think it was a control thing. I think ultimately, maybe not for everybody who creates these games, but I think there's a profound sense of power and control.
And this is something that I love, and I'm creating this game because this is the sort of game that I would love to play.
It's the realization of being a god, a creator, creating a world that these lesser mortals, I don't think people consciously think of it that way, but the idea that these other people are going to have to buy into your world, that this world can be, it can be the vision that you have in mind.
Kevin Wilson created the competition and ran it for a couple of years, and Kevin asked David Dye to take over. And after that first year, I think because of a number of things going on, David was like, yeah, this is not really something I want to do that much. And so he turned to me and said, I think you do a pretty decent job of running it. Are you willing to take it? And so I thought about it for a little while. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do this for a couple of years and then I can hand it off.
This was Kevin's intent in the first place. Lots of people said, oh, I'd love to write a game, but man, Infocom games were huge, Curses is huge, I can't do anything that big. And Kevin said, well, how about you just do a tiny little game? That'd be fine. It could be one room, it could be one puzzle, we'll accept it. And a lot of people said, including me. A lot of people said, yes, I could do something small, it wouldn't take that long.
My best guess is you've got 1,000 to 2,000 people who will download it and try at least one or two games. And then out of that, about 250 people who play enough, play it within the time frame, and then enter their votes.
I tend to think that if we didn't have the competition as something that the community can accrete around, we'd probably be a lot more scattered and dissipated than we are.
It's easier to write a shorter game so that you can get it out there faster, you can get feedback faster, and if it turns out to crash and burn, you go, well, that was 3 or 4 months of my life instead of, that was my 2-year masterpiece.
Every interactive fiction competition has excellent games entered into it, and so the bar is very high that you have to meet. And so coming in 8th place, I just felt like, hey, that's pretty good considering the things that were ahead of me.
The bottom 10 games would just be horrible. They, one room, there's no puzzle, it doesn't work. It takes you 2 seconds to recognize what it is and to close your, interpreter.
Some people whose approach to grading the games and reviewing them, sort of like they take points away from the games like ripping wings off of flies. You start out at a 10 and then you've got a spelling error, so now you're at 9, and this command doesn't work, so you're at an 8, just ripping them off one by one. Thankfully, not everybody is like that. Part of the reason people tend to enter the competition is they're guaranteed that audience, which is good because it does tend to focus attention. But it's also bad because I think in some cases people say, well, yeah, it's kind of crappy. Yeah, I didn't finish it or get it beta tested, but let me enter it anyway and see what people think.
The IFCOM started as a way to get people writing games, at which it was immensely successful. Now, the IFCOM is, in some senses, the only way to write a game. That's not a good outcome, but better than writing no games at all.
They tend to be this black hole that sucks all of the creativity of the community every year into this one time when everyone releases their games.
People have tried different things to get some of the spotlight off the IFCOM, and they have been partially successful.
And I think because of those arguments, some other competitions have sprung up. Actually, I created one, and so did Adam Catter. He created the spring thing. Instead of continually attacking the annual comp, we've just gone and created our own.
Because I have to admit that I do miss the long games. The short games tend to have a few really good games come out of the comp every year, but there's just something different about the long games and the short games. The short games don't have that way of involving you for a month and kind of an obsessive activity.
I also think that's actually probably a pretty good description of why a lot of really bad IF writing is really bad, is that people imagine it as being what they later discovered 3D graphics simulations actually were. They imagine it as being just a way of recreating the world around them in computer form.
What shall we write about? Well, we're either going to write about our own college, this is, or some thinly veiled version of it.
Here's my IF desk, and here are my IF papers, and my IF cup, and I'll drink out of it.
And so, after a while, maybe you had patience for somebody starting you out asleep in your bedroom, like tons and tons of other games. And then after a while, you're like, okay, people.
You get a lot of earnest tries, but the coding isn't quite there. The ideas aren't fully formed.
I think there's a huge problem with interactive fiction games right now being written for the authors.
I think if you look at the comps, you see a lot of people trying self-consciously to be artistic.
There's definitely, which I love, a wing of modern IF that is really out there and trying very weird things.
Boundary-pushing games are not necessarily going to be the best games. They lay groundwork for the best games, I would say.
Advancing the state of accessibility of IF is not really seen by the current community as being a priority, because I think, well, the people who are here now, are the ones who like it.
Whether or not it's going to be the right direction ultimately, who knows? But hell, what's the right direction when it's 200 of us writing games and giving them only to each other? In 98, as early as 98, when I was working on Spider and Web, I was thinking, it would be awfully nice if I could publish a game and get money for it.
There's a lot of people that would like to see IF go commercial.
The question of a company publishing IF into the greater market, man, I hope that works.
Now, a lot of people, some people, think that there is some way to crack the market and sell these games to people who would be, instead of reading books, they'll play interactive fiction games.
It's fun to go make physical manifestations of your game. It's nice to have something up on the mantle you can look at and say, yeah, you know what, I did that. It's not just a bunch of code on the computer. This is something that I can put in my hands.
Yeah, now the piece that I didn't really take into account is that I'm a horrible salesman, right?
Are sales good?
The type of person that spends 4 years coding a computer game is probably maybe usually not the same type of person that can go out and sell that game very effectively. So
sales are all right. Considering that we dumped it on the internet for free, I was actually really happy with it. I made 50 copies of Necrotic Drift. We were able to sell them all through the website. I think I threw the last few on eBay.
although it's really only been available in maybe a dozen shops, those shops continue to sell it. Even it's been 3 years now since I first started selling it, and they still sell.
Light bulb, bing, let's make brand new games in the Infocom tradition and sell them to people who want them. And Valencia was born.
The way to get interactive fiction out to more people beyond our community and other communities is marketing.
The perception is, from a lot of people's point of view, is what is it? And I think I've spent more time and resources trying to write marketing facts. What is it? What is it? What is it?
It's going to require a serious effort to market the product to audiences in a way where that audience is going to say, yeah, I really want to play that.
If I'm going to walk over to a kid who's playing Halo 2 on his Xbox 360 and say, hey kid, want to try a new game? Sure, what do you got? Pentar the Apprentice. What's it about? Well, this is young wizard in a wizard's guild, and he's, his master is captured during his final exams to become a true sorcerer, and you have to go rescue him, and then you have to go to this evil, dark city of mages and conquer an evil queen. Sounds great, let me have him try it. And they sit down at the keyboard and, hey, did it crash?
The game is moderated by a computer, and there's not as much throwing of dice and statistics and so forth. And that seems, I don't know. I don't know how successful that explanation is.
As currently conceived, it's just not marketable under a games industry idea of what you're buying. Because the games industry idea would always say, you're gonna have to add more mazes, or you're gonna have to add unlockable cards that you find, and there are gonna have to be 50 of them, so that we can layer enough extra stuff on there to keep the interactor busy for an extra 12 hours. Otherwise, they're gonna feel cheated when they're done.
We went to a couple of computer game conferences. We'd talk to people and we'd tell them a little bit about what we were doing, and everyone we talked to, we'd get these kind of stunned blank stares. They'd say, text adventures? What does that have to do with commercial games anymore? That was years ago.
I had great hopes for the Michael Bruin Cascade Mountain attempt. That was, 99? I wish that had worked. That didn't work at all.
I would say that the commercial market for interactive fiction is so small that it doesn't warrant an investment of any financial magnitude at all. I think if you want to do it as a home hobbyist, or you want to do it as an artist, or you want to do it to prove a point, or you want to do it to amuse your friends and relatives, that's great. But don't ask me to invest any money in it, because I did that, and it was a total abject failure.
I guess since the first couple of horribly failed attempts, my opinion has been, prove that you have a working company and you're actually going to make some kind of a profit, and I will write you games from now until the cows come home. I would love to switch into doing that full time.
Clearly, if you're going to make something, you have to make sure that there are enough people who are going to buy it to justify your investment. And we didn't do that well enough, or at all. So I don't believe there's a market. But does that stop me? Pretty much.
I'm not desperate to find new commercial opportunities for IF. That's an understatement. I'm not really interested in what the marketplace can do for IF myself. But I think there's advantages to the forum having been through this commercial phase. There's things that can be learned from what businesses did.
Ultimately, it's the same audience that literature has, which is everyone who can read. Young people, old people, people from everywhere.
And one of these days, someone's going to figure out how to put games in front of those people. And maybe it'll be for free, and then lots of people will start playing them. That'll be great. Maybe it'll be for money, in which case lots of people start paying them, and I'll get some money, and that will also be great.
There's a huge untapped audience of mainly people who are not regular gamers who could get into IF if it was made available to them. Infocom, I know, sold a lot of games to older people who are viewed as being outside of the current demographic, people in their 50s and 60s. And a lot of those people are in the news groups now playing games, but there's millions of them who, if they knew this stuff existed, would love to play it.
At least for me, it's much more fun to know that people are playing it and sort of enjoying it than that I get, a couple nice dinners out every year from the proceeds of my games.
And I find it hard to believe that text adventures are going to sell to kids. But, if someone wants to do it and they succeed, good luck to them.
I'm playing in multiplayer online games, which was, again, this is something I didn't do until a few years ago when I said some friends and I were considering starting one up. And I didn't actually have any experience with multiplayer online games. And so, I decided to start playing one just to find out what they were like, because I might be trying to design one, it would be useful to know what there is.
Do you have a preference? Is there one you prefer to use?
I mostly play EverQuest.
Because I've been away from it for so many years. I really didn't know until a few years ago how much of this was still around.
I think it was just maybe at a trade show or something, and someone whipped out an early PDA, and said, look at this, and it was running Planetfall or Hitchhiker's Guide or something.
Pretty dumbfounded, actually.
The biggest confusion I get nowadays is, you write Dilbert, don't you? That's a different Scott Adams.
I think it's great. I'm certainly not losing any royalty on it. I didn't have a royalty interest in any of the games. I was just, on straight salary for Infocom. So, as far as I'm concerned, the more people who can play those games, the better.
We're starting to get into that stage where there are now people who, are in the computer industry and haven't heard of adventure, let alone had it been the seminal point of their career.
Scott was putting out a newsletter, and in it he said, there's another Scott Adams out there that wrote adventure games way back in the dawn of history, and if anybody knows him, please let me know, because I'm getting a bunch of his mail. And he was getting my fan mail. I still get his fan mail, so...
Do you have much case where you're playing EverQuest and someone figures out they're playing against the guy who invented the genre?
No, hasn't come up. It'll be interesting when we finish up here. As I say, I have my guild has a raid at 6 o'clock, and I intend to just sort of mention at some point that what I spent my afternoon doing and see whether it leads to any conversation.
I don't know that I even fully understand what keeps me in it.
The hardest thing is people saying, well, why the hell would you want to do that? It's a genre that died in the late 80s.
It's a hobby for me and not a moral cause.
I think some people, hope in some corner of their hearts that IF will be big again, although nobody knows how or why.
I would be sad if people stopped making them, but the cost to entry for making an IF game is very low, so I don't expect that to be the case.
With so many people now getting online, and that number is going to continue to increase, you're just going to have a lot more people to draw from and get into it. So I don't think it's ever going to go away.
Art forms are never replaced. They're never replaced. They're just added to.
That's one of the articles that comes out every day, every 8 months. Why did the text adventure games die? Why did not just text adventure games? Why did the adventure game die?
To say text adventure games are dead is like the same kind of people who say, right, books are dead, right, because the movies are so much more popular. It makes no sense.
The truth is, text adventure games never died.
If you define the interactive fiction medium as text adventures, then you can say brief, flash in the pan. If you define the medium as one that, like every other medium, evolves over time and through the collaboration and recombination of things from a variety of creators, that medium never died.
When I knew that it was possible to make text games, I've never looked back. It's something I want to do for my whole life. It was an itch that I didn't know that I had until I started scratching it. Now it won't go away. It's a rash, I guess.
So that was the long version of Get Lamp. Like I said, there's an interactive version where you would have had each of those. That's why it feels kind of like a sort of ending. It had to be an ending or not quite an ending. Anyway. So these are the two people who I had interviews scheduled with, who I lost before I got a chance to. Okay. So yeah, it's a 2 DVD set. There's actually a full episode on nothing but Infocom, which actually I really like. And it's more what people think of as a standard documentary. But if you saw it, you'd be like, oh, that's great. You told the story of Infocom. What about the rest of Text Adventures? So that's what that one is. So, and I do have them for sale here if people want to pick up a copy with the 2 DVD and all the rest of the stuff. I like it. And of course, as you saw, it's fully subtitled. I got a thing about that. I get angry if it's not subtitled nowadays because it's like it's free, essentially. If anybody has any questions or comments, I do want to mention that, and I'm not going to make them stand up here, but Mr. Blank and Mr. Woods are here in the audience too, and I really appreciate that. I haven't seen Mr. Blank since I interviewed him something like 4 years ago, so that's great. So if anyone has any questions or comments or whatever, I'll answer yes.
One of the founders of Infocom, or one of the participants in Infocom, mentioned that he's happy to see people still playing games.
Why don't you talk up there? And I'll try to take the microphone. If your question's more than 10 words, people would really appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the in the film, one of the participants mentioned that he was happy to see Infocom games still being played. And since Infocom is bankrupt, did somebody pick up the IP for that? And is
No, that's not on, I guess.
There's no whatever. Well, okay. Well, oh, that's terrible. How will I get by? Where's my latte? Okay. So currently, Infocom IP is owned by Activision. Certain Infocom trademarks are owned by a guy named Pete, who is up. If somebody wants to write Infocom games and call them Infocom, he'll license it to you. But They actually have lapsed some of the trademarks. So Zork lapsed, but Leather Goddesses of Phobos, they renewed. I don't get it either. I'm sorry, whatever. But Activision owns it, right? Activision licensed it to something called, I think it was Legends of Zork, which was like a click-through adventure game that you can play now. So they still own it. They'll still defend it. They'll still get cranky if you send out copies, regardless of what Steve tells you. Steve's all behind it, but Steve's not going to be your final sign-off. So, and yes.
So, Jason, nobody seemed to mention augmented reality games, which are very hot today as a successor.
Nobody mentioned augmented reality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did they ever mention it, or just? I thought that was odd that no one thought.
There's a lot of contemporary space things that are not mentioned in this movie because then it would be 2 hours long. And I figured the hardest part of the movie was trying to get, like I said, there was no text adventure movie. Now I've made the last one. And the thing is it's saddled with several major vectors that are a problem. It has to flow reasonably well. It also has to cover subjects that are ethereal and mental. And it has to kind of feel like it gave justice to older subjects. And the problem is for instance, it doesn't really mention MMOs except for hilariously, right? And it doesn't mention augmented reality games or alternate reality games or any of that stuff because, A, I didn't have Jane McGonigal's home number yet. And also, I just thought that it was like, I felt like, you'll notice this movie really gives you a lot of credit as a viewer. Right? The more I've watched it, I'm like, wow. Like when you watch a lot of like documentaries, like on Discovery, it's like, dude was attacked by a bear. Here's the bear. This is the guy. There's the bear again. The guy's doing this thing. We're gonna break to a commercial. We come back. The guy is being attacked by a bear. And you're like, wow, I can watch it with the sound off and get it, right? This film, blink it and you miss it. You are in the woods. You're literally in the woods with cavers. And so there's a lot of that. And so one of the things I did that didn't take it for granted was you might then go, knowing all this, I will now move into contemporary space and I will understand from this where this all comes from. I'll have a better grip of it. I didn't feel like I needed to finally connect the dots. That's the only reason why. Because now there are so many gaming documentaries that are just in contemporary. And I was like, nobody's really, tracked down the Infocom guys and Scott Adams and put them all together in a movie, so at least we can see what their take on things was. That was the thinking. Yes, in the back. I'll just repeat the question.
You've done bulletin board systems, and you've done text adventures. Anything next?
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Hey, you're right. Okay, I've done bulletin board systems. I've done text adventures. Am I going to do anything next? Yes. I'm actually relatively poor, although this movie does pay for my current existence, which is pretty hilarious in the scheme of independent film that makes me Spielberg. But I'd like to do 3 at once next. Stick with me. There are 3 technical documentaries. I found making these previous ones, each one took about 4 years, and the biggest thing was travel. So I'm doing a Kickstarter very shortly for $100,000, which will already get some attention, I'm sure. And it's going to be 3 films. And I've been kind of leaking it to Q&A for a while, so I'll just tell you. The first one would be on tape. And in the same scheme as bulletin board systems and text adventures, the next question is, how could that possibly be interesting? And I like that challenge. That means nobody else is doing it. So this would be about audio, video, and magnetic tape, and its meaning in our history, and the loss of memory, and the cultures that lived on tape, and so on. So that's tape. Tape is the big one. The one that I'm also looking to do is one on arcades, and that would be a podcast series. Those would be little tiny 10 to 15-minute arcade-esque documentaries, because we do stuff about the games. We have all seen Pac-Man moving slowly on a screen while someone tells you video games were fun. But there's not a whole lot of things about those places, and the fact that, people are like, well, what would your arcade documentary podcast series thing cover? And I'm like, well, it would start at 17th century automaton lounges. At this point, they're like, what? up through to MAME. So I'm like, just this idea that for years, for hundreds of years, we have willingly moved into small rooms and paid somebody to let us have fun with machines. Why? Why do we do that? So that would be arcade, and I own arcadedocumentary.com. And the third one would be on the 6502 chip. Yeah! I'm at Google. So, welcome to Google. What? Yeah! So yeah, programmers, I want to make a movie that actually makes assembly language make sense. That's its challenge. And talk to people like, Bill Budge and John Romero, who used to do 6502 programming, about the unique natures of that, and Jerry Ellsworth, who's a friend, and talk. Who does?
Bill Budge.
Yes, I know he works here. I was trying to go bother him at the Game Developers Conference, and I decided it was too creepy. I figured I'd wait. Where is he? It's a good question. I don't know where he is, but this is why I want to get the funding very soon and go talk to Chuck very soon, because I have a little problem with my movies. But anyway, so those are the three, and I would put them together because it's easier for me to sometimes interview somebody about portions of both, because I could talk to an arcade game programmer who could tell me about arcade spaces, but could also tell me about programming, perhaps not as much as about tape, but maybe. Anyway, so there you go. Now those are my three, because I feel like I don't know how many more years I want to do this, and I'd rather just do one big mega film craziness. Ones I will not do, people wanted me to do ham radio, no. Demo scene, no. There was a few that were kind of weird. A few people are unhappy because they want me to cover their software company like I covered these software companies, and no. But that's the life that you gotta live when you make a choice. These are all done by one guy, right? This is one guy made this film. So that's it. I'm the sound, I'm the lighting, I'm the questioner, I'm the editor, I'm the package designer, I'm the Q&A answerer. I'm everything you can imagine. So that's people are like, you should have gone more to Europe. I'm like, maybe you should have gone more to Europe. I happened to be called in for a speech that I gave in England, and that's why I could interview Richard Bartle. Because I was like, hey, Richard Bartle, could you come over? And otherwise, I would have never gotten Richard Bartle, and he willingly came, which was nice of him. All right, any other question? Yes?
Did you try to interview Graham Nelson?
Yes, I tried to interview Graham Nelson and Emily Short, for anybody who cares about that. This is being streamed. Emily Short said no. Oh, I'm not afraid to say this, I guess. Emily Short said no. I said, okay. How about if I send you written questions, you submit me written answers, and you appear on a screen answering them? No. Graham Nelson didn't even bother to respond through proxy. Even Will Crowther responded through proxies and said, nah. And before anyone goes, why did Will Crowther not go in this? And the answer is Will Crowther does not look back at this. Literally, it's like saying, dude, how'd you like kindergarten? And it ain't, he just doesn't see, he created the friggin' ARPANET, and people are like, remember that little screensaver you programmed when you were in high school? I mean, it feels like that to him. And so in all of his interviews about it, he'll talk about it, but he doesn't go crazy talking about that time. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to show up at this guy's house. You know what this movie did not need? Blurry footage of him running to his car. I like to think, this is my general approach, I like to think I can have dinner with pretty much everyone in the movie and have them feel comfortable eating dinner with me because they feel like I did right by them. I don't think that a movie like this, especially this, should not use people like there's something. So, yeah. So there's a few people who declined, like Emily Short, Graham Nelson, a couple of the Infocom people didn't have the time or just things didn't work out. And so on. So, it happens. So before you.
To Crowther at the end.
Yeah, I thanked Will Crowther.
Did he help it at all? Or?
Yeah, he made Adventure. Yeah, thanks, man. High five, high two. Yeah, I mean, that was it. It was like, thanks for Will Crowther for doing it, basically, and for not getting ticked off that I still stuck a picture in there. I made sure that picture was as obscure, as old as possible. I mean, I have new pictures of him, and I have pictures of him from when he was a caver. But I thought, if he's not comfortable with being in this movie, I'm not going to make really personally identifiable photos of the guy. So, I just said, you know what, I'm going to thank him because he did this. Like I thank you for also doing it. The coins are numbered individually, and I have coin number 2 because I gave Mr. Woods coin number 1. I figured he deserved it more. There was another question. Yeah.
In terms of other languages, do you have any idea how popular the interactive games were, let's say in Chinese, German, India, or Spanish or anything?
Questions about alternate scenes of other languages of interactive fiction. And I have spoken with the Spanish IF clique, some level of German, some level of, well, here's the thing, English, right? British English. There's a whole scene there that I only somewhat cover because I just didn't think I could do them justice. I'd rather do this and someone go, it's like that, but we did this and this. I'd rather be a difference, a delta. And so there are these other scenes, and they also have it. There's also this awesome adult interactive fiction group that's been around for like 15 years. And the only one who would talk to me at all from it was the beautifully cynical Adam, who's in there. He's the balding guy who every time, it's cut this way. Every time you see him, he says something cynical and depressing about text adventure. So he's the one who's like, mazes, kill me now, or yeah, why would I sell it? I could maybe make money for a dinner, and everything else. And he's made all these legitimate, well, you know what I'm saying, legitimate, safe for work text adventures, but he's also the creator of Stiffy McCain in The Undiscovered Country. But the rest of them were like, good work, keep going, back up. So there's a bit of that going on. So okay, missed that scene too. So it's like this, but a little different. Any other questions? Yes.
A lot of companies succeed, make money, giving away tax and supporting tax.
Okay.
Is that theoretically possible? As a final
Okay, I've been asked a lot of stuff about like text adventures as a business, which is what you're asking. Like, is there models and stuff that might work for text adventures? And there's been, it's a puzzler. And the thing is, the biggest problem with it is that, bear in mind again, I'm an outside observer technically. I was embedded with text adventures for 4 years, but I also want to make clear I'm outsider in many ways. First of all, I want to say that Andrew Plotkin, who's that dude with the huge glasses and the furry hair, did a Kickstarter last year to say, let me stop working and I will create a new text adventure for the iPhone, and I will release the toolkit I'm developing to make it, and I will release it for sale on the iPhone. And he asked for, I think it was, I want to say he asked for $20,000 or $15,000 for this, and he got $31,000. So he's doing that full time right now. So he's doing it, right? He's living the dream. And his take was iPhone text adventure, right? That was his approach. But on the whole, I mean, bear in mind also, Andrew Plotkin is a friggin' master, right? He's like the best of the best in terms of contemporary interactive fiction authors. Absolutely the best. So this is a big deal, and he has a huge following both in and out of the community. So he was able to do this. The problem with text adventures is that there is a galactically huge-sized, massive, fully playable archive of them that is every bit as compelling and well-made as anything you would get now. It is absolutely the case that you can play these fantastic games that come out for free every year that are as good as anything. And the amount of work to make it a little better or reach a little more is really a huge burden, and that's what's killing that idea, to which, as you might have hopefully gleaned from that, some of them are perfectly fine with. They're delighted. They're like, whatever, I don't need that anymore. I don't need people lying to sell me text adventures. Go ahead and play them. So like on the iPad, you can download Frotz, and Frotz comes with like 30 games that are going to eat your month, that are great in every single way. I mean, and that's their problem. Their problem is the old product is as good. It's like selling oranges, and the oranges from forever are just as great.
It's 2 minutes till the video conference and the videotaping ends.
Okay, all right. So we can go either way. And so was there any other?
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we could hire that guy to help him write our tech documentation, because you need to hunt through online stuff to find the right answer.
Inside joke about technical writing. All right, is there, yes, sir.
There's a subgenre of text adventures, graphical text adventures, that started with Vogue. Did you do any viewing or exploring that?
Did I cover graphical text adventures, or did I do any interviewing? I certainly there's 120 hours of raw footage, right, which became this movie. Certainly some people would go a little bit into graphical adventures or discuss Sierra. Sierra is a really big one, but I really felt I wanted to cover text adventures strongest. I will release all of the raw footage, checking it for somebody saying something really, truly awful, onto archive.org. So I always do that anyway. The movies are Creative Commons licensed anyway, right? I had a group rip it and put it on the Pirate Bay, and they did it wrong. Because it's that interactive thing, it's multiple chapters. They got the order wrong, so I wrote a big note about thanks, but you got it wrong. Here's the actual chapter order. Could you rip in that way instead? And they went, oh my God, I'm sorry. And they ripped it again and released a repack and everything else. And this totally made the torrent community flip out, and I sold dozens and dozens in 2 days because they were like, oh my God, this guy, oh my God. And the NFO is really, really positive. It's like, Jason, it's got the greatest phrase ever. Because bear in mind, right, this is my second big movie, right, ever. I mean, previously that was student films. And it says in the thing, as is typical with Jason Scott Productions. Good trend management. And yes, you had one.
Yeah, there was one of the statements that people were making was that IF games nowadays are pretty much made by the 200 authors and released to the 200 authors.
Yeah, that's one cynical person's response, is that they are 200 authors making games for 200 authors. That's not quite true.
I was wondering to what extent people actually believe that, or that was just an exaggeration.
What I tried to do there is whenever I do these things, right, I mean, there's always that balance between my narrative voice and my evocations and what the group thinks. So there's also documenting, here's the various opinions on that. And you can see some people are like, nobody pays attention to us. And other people are like, these are incredible. Everyone loves us. Well, I think what it comes down to is that maybe once every year, really hungry areas like Reddit and stuff, somebody will link to it, and it'll gain just enough passers-by to go, whoa, adventure games, and they go to it and they play it, and they're like, whoa, these are really well-made, whoa. And so that happens. I think that it's a tough sell. I always think adventure games are a tough sell, right? I mean, but some of the modern ones are really, really well-made, and some of them are really unusual. For instance, if you're like, well, Jason, what's a good modern one, right? There's two that I always recommend to people. The first one is called Photopia. Came out in 1999. It takes about an hour and a half to play, and when you finish it, you are emotionally affected. You can't not win, right? You play it an hour and a half, and you're like, oh, you have to close your door on your yurt. And then there's Lost Pig, which won, a year and a half, 2 years ago. You are an orc, and you've lost your pig. And the pig has gone down into this cave, and now you're in the cave. You fell in the cave to get the pig. Now you have to get the pig. So it takes you, like a typical adventure game, forever to figure out how to rescue yourself and the pig. During which, this is the brilliant part, first of all, it talks to you like a orc. So it's like, see thing with light. Not sure where that goes, kind of scary. Very strange. You pull thing, and thing moves other thing. Now thing goes away. Thing can go now. And so you've got to negotiate what this guy is saying. And I think what the best part to me is the pig is always there. Like if you try to grab it, it slips out of your way. But the pig follows you the whole time you're trying to get the pig. In fact, not too much minor spoiler, but at one point the pig helps you. Like the pig's like, and that helps you move on to the next thing. So there's Lost Pig. And this is a contemporary game that came out 2 years ago that I think is just brilliant. It won the Zizzy Awards, which are they just had them, the yearly awards to who have made the best games of the past year, which they give away. And they're really amazing. So anyway, I'm saying it's still vibrant, but it's tough. I mean, a lot of people start the game up and they're like, this is awesome. And about 15 minutes later, they're like, oh, look at this YouTube video. and the story's over. And so that's a problem. But I think the question is that one might have is, are you happy you spent 4 years on this? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is like I get to carry Zeus's water on his way to the podium to like send off some lightning bolts. I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm a roadie for Zeus. So that's, for me, it's like all these wonderful people who affected me. I mean, I'm only 40, which means that, I played this thing with my cousin when I was, 11 or 12. I played Adventure with my cousin. And so for me, this is like, yay. Anyway, I think we're pretty much out of time. So wonderful. Thank you so much for sticking through it.